What if we could actually predict our brain's future? In this explainer, we're going to dive into some absolutely fascinating new research that uses AI, artificial intelligence, to find the earliest, faintest warning signs of cognitive decline years, and I mean years, before it ever becomes a serious problem.
Seriously, think about that for a second. We tend to think our brain health is kind of separate from what we eat or how we live, right? But what if it's not? What if a few simple clues from our biology and our lifestyle could give us a real glimpse into our cognitive future?
Okay, to get why this is so important, just look at this number, 15.07 million. That's the estimated number of dementia cases in China alone. Just China, back in 2020. I mean, that's more than a quarter of the entire world's dementia population. The scale of this is just immense, which is exactly why finding ways to step in early, that's the absolute top priority. All right, so let's talk about the warning signs, because dementia doesn't just show up out of the blue. Nope. There's this crucial earlier stage that acts as a kind of, well, a warning sign. And understanding this stage, that's the key to everything. And that warning sign has a name: Mild Cognitive Impairment, or MCI for short. Now, think of it like a middle ground, a transitional stage. It's more than just that normal, where did I put my keys kind of forgetfulness that comes with aging. It's a noticeable change, for sure. But, and this is key, it's not yet bad enough to really mess with someone's daily life or independence. And that is the critical window. That's where we can actually make a difference. So this really breaks it down for you. With normal aging, yeah, you might forget where you put your keys, but you'll probably find them later. With MCI, though, you might start forgetting really important events or entire conversations, and it's happening more often. And then you get to dementia, and that's when these memory problems start to seriously get in the way of everyday stuff, like even just making a cup of tea. So you see, MCI is that clear, flashing warning light right in the middle. Okay, so if catching MCI is so important, you're probably thinking, well, we should be screening for it everywhere, right? But here's the thing, there's a huge problem. It's actually incredibly difficult to catch it early, especially when you're talking about screening millions of people. And get this, the stakes could not be higher. This quote from the research paper just spells it out. Folks with MCI have a tenfold higher risk of progressing to dementia each year. 10 times. So missing that early diagnosis isn't just a small mistake, it's a massive missed opportunity to help. So what's the holdup? Why is it so hard to catch? Well, it's kind of a perfect storm, really. You've got a shortage of specialists, especially out in rural areas. There's also this stigma that, stops people from even asking for help. And on top of all that, the traditional tests can be really complex, and they take a lot of time. It all adds up, and a lot of people just fall through the cracks. But this is where things get really interesting. This is where the new research comes in. Instead of just relying on the old methods, scientists are now turning to AI, to artificial intelligence, to try and build a better, faster, and way more accessible screening tool. And the core idea is actually pretty simple and brilliant. The researchers basically asked, hey, what if we could just feed a computer a ton of data? I'm talking blood tests, physical measurements, lifestyle habits, the whole shebang. Could we then teach it to find the hidden patterns, the subtle combination of factors that point to a high risk of MCI? So here's how they actually did it. First, they collected a whole bunch of data from over 900 adults living in rural China. Then they took all that data and used it to train 7 different AI models to see which one was the best at spotting MCI. And finally, once they had a winner, they dug into that top model to figure out exactly which factors were the most powerful predictors. All right, now for the really cool part. What did the AI actually find? What are these hidden clues tucked away in our bodies and our daily habits that can predict our risk for cognitive decline? Okay, so the AI model zeroed in on these 9 factors as being the most important. And you'll see some stuff you might expect, right, like age and BMI. But then you also see some, well, more surprising ones. Things like hip circumference, sleep quality, and a few biochemicals you might not have heard of, like choline and TMAO. We'll get to that. Okay, first things first. It's absolutely no surprise to anyone that age was the single biggest predictor. That's a gimme. We've known for ages, no pun intended, that the risk of cognitive decline goes up as we get older. So the AI confirmed what we already knew. But, and this is the big but, Here's where the surprise comes in. The AI found that some of the next most powerful predictors right after age were these things called metabolites, and they're directly linked to our diet and our gut bacteria. This is pointing to a really powerful connection between our gut and our brain. Just take a look at this chart. Right there, after age, you see choline and this other compound called TMAO. So what is TMAO? Well, it's a little molecule that our gut bacteria produce when we digest foods that are rich in things like choline and carnitine. Think red meat, eggs. So the huge takeaway here is that the AI is screaming at us that these biomarkers, things that reflect what we eat and the health of our gut, are incredibly predictive of our brain health. Okay, so to make this feel a bit less, abstract, the paper actually walks us through how the model works for one specific person. This is great because it helps us see how the AI is juggling all these different factors to come up with its final prediction. All right, so for this individual who the AI correctly flagged as having MCI, you can see what pushed their risk score up. They were older, which makes sense. They had high levels of those gut-related markers we talked about, choline and TMAO. And interestingly, in this case, a lower BMI also nudged their risk a bit higher. But it wasn't a one-way street. Not everything was pushing the risk up. For this same person, having a larger hip circumference actually pushed their prediction in the other direction, slightly lowering their overall risk score. And that really shows you the nuance here. The AI isn't just looking at one thing in isolation, it's looking at the complex dance between all of these different factors. So, what does all this mean for the future, for the real world? Could a model like this actually be used in your local clinic? Well, the results are actually really promising. The best model they tested, something called a random forest model, it scored a 74% on a metric called area under the curve, or AUC. Now, all you need to know is that a 50% is basically a random coin flip, so 74% is significantly better than just guessing. And with a 72% sensitivity, well, that means it was pretty darn good at correctly flagging people who were genuinely at risk. And really, this is the big takeaway. What this research shows is that it's totally possible to build a screening tool that is driven by data, that's convenient, and that could be used for tons of people, especially in communities that don't have easy access to specialists, because it's just using biomarkers and lifestyle data that are relatively easy to collect. And to really nail down the scientific importance here, this quote from the study's conclusion just says it all. The discoveries about TMAO and those other gut-related markers, they're not just useful for predicting risk. They give us real biological clues into the mechanisms, the actual pathways that lead to cognitive decline in the first place. So we're ending right back where we started, but now we have some pretty compelling evidence. The research strongly suggests that the answer to our question is a big yes. Could the key to our future brain health really be found in our blood, our bodies, and our lifestyle? It looks like the clues to protecting our brains down the road might not be some far-off medical mystery, but something found right here inside us, in our gut, and in the choices we make every single day.